On paper, GTA 6 should make a base PlayStation 5 beg for mercy. Seriously, just look at what Rockstar is trying to put on screen at the same time: a massive open world, 6 confirmed regions, packed streets, wildlife, traffic, huge crowds, detailed interiors, reflections, physics, and characters that already seem far more alive than the pedestrians we knew in GTA 5. And somehow, all of this is supposed to run on a regular PS5. So the question isn't really, can the PS5 run GTA 6? Rockstar has already answered that. The real question is, how? Because once you start breaking down Rockstar's footage, Take-Two's patents, and the actual PS5 hardware, something really interesting starts to appear. GTA 6 isn't just throwing more power at everything. Instead, it seems to be building a world that knows where to spend its power, when to save it, and most importantly, what the player actually needs to see. And believe it or not, one of the smartest parts has almost nothing to do with graphics. Let's start with the crowds. Rockstar has officially shown Vice City, the Leonida Keys, Grass Rivers, Port Gellhorn, Ambrosia, and Mount Calaga. And almost every busy shot gives us the same impression: density. The beaches are crowded, the roads are busy, bars actually feel occupied, and everywhere you look, people seem to be wearing different clothes, moving differently, and doing their own little things. But here's what makes that impressive. Creating a believable city isn't as simple as placing 200 NPCs on a beach. That's the easy part. The difficult part is making those 200 people look different enough that your brain stops noticing the system creating them. And that's where one of Take-Two's patents becomes extremely interesting. The patent describes a tag-based system for constructing and rendering game objects. Now, that sounds incredibly boring, but stay with me, because the idea behind it is actually pretty clever. Imagine an NPC being built from different compatible pieces: a head, hair, clothing, accessories, body components, materials, and other assets. Instead of Rockstar having to create every complete NPC individually from scratch, these different components can be organized using metadata and rules. Those rules can determine which pieces work together and which ones don't. So, in theory, Rockstar can create huge amounts of variation without manually building every single character as a completely separate model. And it gets even smarter. The patent also describes replacing pieces of clothing that you can't actually see with cheaper versions. For example, imagine an NPC wearing a t-shirt. That shirt could have its own geometry, physics, materials, and movement, but then the NPC puts a jacket over it. Most of that t-shirt is now hidden, so why waste resources rendering and simulating parts of it that the player can't even see? Instead, the system can use a cheaper version underneath, and suddenly you've got two things happening at once: more variety and better performance. Now, just to be clear, this doesn't prove that every NPC in GTA 6 is generated using this exact system. A patent isn't the same thing as a confirmed feature list, but it does show us the kind of problems Take-Two has been trying to solve. How do you create more believable variety without paying the full performance cost for every single character? And when you look back at GTA 6's crowds, that question suddenly becomes very relevant. The game doesn't need every NPC to be completely unique at a genetic level. It just needs enough combinations, enough different behaviors, and enough visual variety that repetition becomes difficult to notice. But appearance is only half the problem, because eventually, all of those people have to start moving. And this is where traffic, police, and navigation become much more important than they first appear. If you've played GTA 5 for long enough, you've probably seen an NPC driver completely lose their mind. A car suddenly cuts across 3 lanes. Someone gets confused by a basic obstacle, or an NPC decides the safest way around traffic is to launch themselves directly into disaster. It's funny in GTA 5, but in GTA 6, with denser roads, larger crowds, and a more realistic world, bad navigation would stand out immediately. And Take-Two has another patent that focuses specifically on virtual navigation. The system describes road networks operating at different levels of detail. That means an NPC doesn't necessarily need the entire state of Leonida loaded at maximum complexity just to drive through one intersection. Instead, the system can focus on the road information that actually matters: available space, desired speed, upcoming turns, lane structure, road restrictions, and the area around the vehicle. Then, as the vehicle moves, the information can change with it. That's important because intelligent traffic isn't impressive when every car is doing something crazy. Actually, it's the opposite. Good traffic should look boring most of the time. Cars hold their lanes, drivers react naturally, traffic flows, and because normal driving looks believable, the moment something does go wrong, a crash, a police chase, a roadblock, or a sudden lane change, it feels much more convincing. Watch some of the GTA 6 highway footage again. With that in mind, most cars aren't doing anything dramatic, and that's exactly why the scene works. But police behavior takes this even further. Rockstar's official footage already presents law enforcement in a much more grounded way than the arcade-style chaos we often associate with older GTA games. Now, there are plenty of theories online about CCTV systems, witnesses, dispatch mechanics, and how police might identify the player. Some of those ideas are really interesting, but they haven't all been officially confirmed. So rather than pretending every theory is fact, the important thing is the direction Rockstar appears to be taking. The city shouldn't simply exist for the player to cause chaos in, it should feel like the city reacts to that chaos. And then we get to another problem, the ground itself. Look closely at GTA 6's trailers and screenshots. There's sand, dirt, roads, wet surfaces, grass, dust, debris, tire contact, footsteps, and all kinds of small interactions between characters, vehicles, and the environment. Now, calling all of this a completely dynamic terrain system would be going further than Rockstar has officially confirmed, but there is something we can clearly see. The surfaces are being used to sell weight. Vehicles don't look like they're floating over the ground. Feet interact with loose surfaces. Impacts kick up particles. Tires leave visible marks in certain shots, and even without claiming that every footprint stays permanently across the entire map, those details make the world feel physical, which creates another expensive problem. Destruction. Look closely at some of the action scenes. You can see dust, sparks, glass, fragments, and small pieces of debris reacting around the characters. Now, breaking glass isn't new. Games have been doing that for years, but the interesting part is how many small reactions can happen around the player without turning the entire scene into a performance nightmare. Because every little fragment can require geometry, motion, collision, transparency, lighting, or particle effects. One broken window doesn't sound expensive, but now imagine those systems operating across a dense open world city. Suddenly, the problem becomes much bigger, and we're still not finished, because now we need lighting. GTA 6 is full of reflective cars, wet streets, neon, glass, water, bright Florida sunlight, dark interiors, and small light sources scattered throughout buildings and streets. Now yes, the PS5 supports hardware-accelerated ray tracing, but that doesn't mean every reflection you see in GTA 6 is automatically ray traced. Modern games mix techniques. Some effects may use ray tracing, others may use screen space reflections, probes, baked lighting, rasterization tricks, or combinations of multiple systems. The important thing isn't what buzzword is attached to every reflection, it's the final result. Light feels connected to the materials, glass feels like glass, cars react to their surroundings, wet surfaces reflect the world, and even small objects can suddenly look incredibly expensive. Which brings us back to optimization, because perhaps the smartest thing GTA 6 does isn't deciding what to render, it's deciding what not to render. Remember that object generation patent from earlier? It also describes level of detail information, and level of detail is one of the oldest and most important tricks in real-time graphics. The idea is simple. A model close to the player can use a highly detailed version. Move farther away and the engine swaps it for something simpler. Go farther again and another cheaper version can appear. Eventually, tiny details can disappear completely, because if something only occupies a handful of pixels on your screen, why spend huge amounts of processing power drawing details you literally can't see? And the beach footage is the perfect example. Look at the NPCs closest to the camera. Their clothing is easy to see. Their movement is more detailed. You can notice tattoos, props, gestures, body movement, and small interactions. Your eyes naturally focus on those people. And now look much farther into the background. Those NPCs become something completely different. Shapes, colors, movement, silhouettes. And that's fine. They don't need the same skin detail. They don't need the same animation complexity. And they don't need the exact same geometric quality as someone standing directly beside Lucia, because you wouldn't be able to appreciate that detail anyway. And this is where simulation scaling becomes incredibly important. A world can feel equally alive without every part of that world being equally expensive. That's the trick. Rockstar doesn't need every NPC across the entire state of Leonida running maximum fidelity logic at exactly the same time. The game can prioritize the people closest to you, the vehicles around you, the physics you're interacting with, nearby audio, nearby objects, and the things that actually affect what you're doing. Meanwhile, distant systems can operate at cheaper levels, so a beach can still look packed, without every person in the distance calculating some incredibly complex personal routine 60 times every second. And once you understand that, GTA 6 running on a base PS5 starts sounding a little less impossible. But there's still one massive problem: animation. Rockstar Games are known for weight. Characters don't just slide from one point to another. They turn, they shift their balance, they plant their feet, they move across slopes, they climb, they stumble, they aim, they reach, they enter vehicles, they interact with objects, and they transition between all of those actions. Now add different body shapes, different speeds, different surfaces, different directions, different vehicles, different props, and different environments. If every single possible combination needed its own completely separate handcrafted animation, Rockstar would drown in animations. And this is where Take-Two's virtual character locomotion patent becomes very interesting. The patent describes a more data-driven approach using animation building blocks. Instead of creating one gigantic animation tree for every possible situation, smaller pieces can be combined and blended depending on things like movement, direction, and speed. Think of it like this: Rockstar's animators still create high-quality movement. The system isn't replacing animators. Instead, those animations become ingredients, and the game can blend those ingredients together depending on what's happening. So, rather than needing a completely separate animation for every microscopic variation, the engine has more flexibility. And no, that doesn't mean some magical AI is sitting inside your PS5 creating brand new Hollywood quality animations every frame. That's not really how this works. A better way to think about it is like a language. Rockstar creates the vocabulary. The system helps build sentences, and then things get even more interesting, because there's also runtime retargeting. Take-Two published another patent application describing a system that can adjust existing motion in real time to better fit changing characters, objects, surfaces, and situations. And this solves the kind of problems players notice without even realizing they're noticing them. Imagine a hand reaching for an object. If the object is slightly higher than expected, the character shouldn't grab empty air. Imagine someone walking across an uneven surface. Their feet shouldn't constantly clip through the ground. Imagine a character leaning against a railing. If that railing is a little higher than the one used during motion capture, the animation still needs to look natural. Or imagine Jason reaching for a vehicle door while the car is parked on an angle. Same basic animation, different situation. The system can help adapt the motion to what's actually happening. And this may explain something important about GTA 6's realism. The magic probably isn't one enormous breakthrough, it's thousands of tiny systems stopping the illusion from breaking. That's why I wouldn't simply describe GTA 6 as having the most advanced AI ever created. It sounds exciting, but it doesn't really explain anything. What's more interesting is the stack of specialized systems working together. Crowd variation, navigation, animation blending, runtime retargeting, rendering priorities, physics, streaming, audio. Each system solves a different problem, and together they create something that looks intelligent. Now we can finally come back to the PlayStation 5. The original PS5 has an 8-core, 16-thread Zen 2 CPU, a custom R DNA2-based GPU rated at around 10.3 teraflops, 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, and an SSD capable of around 5.5 gigabytes per second of raw red bandwidth. But here's the thing, those numbers aren't magic. GTA 6 can't simply load the entire state of Leonida at maximum quality into memory and hope everything works. That's not how an open world game like this survives. Instead, the engine is constantly making decisions: what needs to be loaded, what needs maximum detail, what can be simplified, what can disappear, and what is the player probably going to need next. The SSD is a massive part of that. Older open world games were designed around storage that was dramatically slower. Developers had to hide loading in all kinds of creative ways: long corridors, elevators, restricted movement, fog, repeated assets, limited travel speeds, anything that gave the hardware more time. But fast storage changes the equation. The game can stream geometry, textures, audio, animation data, and world information much more aggressively as the player moves. And here's an important detail: the SSD itself isn't magically predicting where you're going. The game engine knows your position, your direction, your speed, your camera, the vehicle you're driving, and what's around you. Using that information, it can request data before you actually need it. So if Jason is flying down a highway, the game has a pretty good idea which parts of that highway are about to become important. If he suddenly walks into a house, priorities change. Now the interior matters, the furniture matters, nearby characters matter, lighting inside the room matters. Meanwhile, a building several blocks away becomes far less important. And this is where another classic optimization technique comes in: Occlusion, culling. Just because something exists in the game world doesn't mean the console has to spend full rendering power drawing it. If a wall is blocking an object, if one building is hiding another, or if the camera is facing in the opposite direction, there's no reason to perform maximum rendering work on something the player can't even see. The exact methods are more complicated than that, of course. Some hidden objects may still exist in simplified simulation, but visually, the principle is incredibly simple. Don't spend resources on pixels that never reach the screen. Imagine Jason standing inside a small room. The console can focus on Jason, nearby furniture, bottles, lighting, reflections, shadows, and the NPC standing beside him. At that exact moment, why would the PlayStation 5 need to render a perfect crowd on a beach miles away? It doesn't. And when Jason walks outside again, the priorities change. That's the real trick. The game is constantly reshuffling its resources. High detail assets close to you, cheaper assets farther away, complex animations where you'll notice them, simpler simulation where you won't. World data streamed when it becomes relevant, hidden geometry ignored, character components simplified when they are covered, navigation data loaded at useful levels. None of these techniques sounds unbelievable on its own, but when you combine all of them, that's how a console survives a game that looks far beyond what its raw specifications might suggest, and Rockstar has been doing this for a very long time. GTA 5 originally launched on PlayStation 3. Think about that. The PS3 had only 256 megabytes of main system memory alongside separate video memory, yet Rockstar somehow made Los Santos work. Then Red Dead Redemption 2 arrived on the PlayStation 4. Huge landscapes, dense towns, wildlife, weather, physics, detailed characters, and some of the best animation Rockstar had ever produced on a base PS4. Go back even further. And GTA, San Andreas had to survive on the tiny memory budget of the PlayStation 2. Remember that famous orange haze in the distance? It looked atmospheric, it became part of the game's identity, but limited visibility also helped hide the restrictions of the hardware. And that's the pattern. Every console generation changes the tricks, but the philosophy remains surprisingly similar. Spend detail where the player can appreciate it, and hide the compromise where they can't. So, can a base PS5 really run GTA 6? Yes. The much more interesting question is what compromises Rockstar will choose to make it happen. Resolution can change. Frame rate targets matter. Crowd density can scale. Ray traced effects can be selective. Distance simulation can become simpler. Geometry can move through multiple quality levels. Textures can change depending on distance. And the engine can constantly decide where every bit of performance is actually worth spending. We won't know Rockstar's exact final balance until we get much closer to release and eventually see the game running in players' hands. But the footage already tells us something important. GTA 6 isn't impressive because the PlayStation 5 suddenly became more powerful. It didn't. GTA 6 is impressive because Rockstar appears to be squeezing more believable work out of every piece of hardware the console already has. And here's the part I find most interesting. When somebody watches GTA 6 and says, "There is absolutely no way a base PS5 is running that," they're actually describing what great optimization is supposed to look like. You aren't supposed to notice the tricks. You're supposed to notice the beach, not the level of detail change happening in the distance. You're supposed to notice realistic traffic, not the navigation system deciding how much route information an NPC needs. You're supposed to notice a character naturally reaching toward an object, not the system adjusting the animation in the background. You're supposed to see a living city, not the hundreds of technical decisions happening underneath it. And that's the illusion Rockstar has spent decades learning how to build. If they get it right, GTA 6 won't feel like some technical demo struggling to survive on console hardware. It'll simply feel like Leonida is there, alive, moving around you, reacting to you. And the PlayStation 5 itself will almost disappear into the background. And that, more than any single ray trace reflection, giant crowd, animation patent, or technical buzzword, is what makes GTA 6 so fascinating. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe to Rifterix Gaming. We've got a lot more GTA 6 details, hidden systems, and Rockstar clues to break down. And if you want another GTA 6 deep dive right now, click the video on screen, because trust me, there's a lot more hiding inside Rockstar's footage than at first appears.